Japan and South Korea. I wish I had attended this panel 15 years ago when I got into games because it would have saved me a lot of time. Ideally, this will have a variety of answers for your questions. The panel today is moderated by Kim-Mai CUTLER, who is a technology, mobile game, social games writer for TechCrunch, and came to TechCrunch via Inside Network, where she covered the industry. A lot of you are familiar with AppData and a variety of the other services that Inside Network provides. So with that, I'll let her introduce her panel.
Hi, I'm Kim-Mai from TechCrunch. So I've been writing or covering the social and mobile gaming industry for the past couple years, and it's been really fascinating to watch the changes in the South Korean, Japanese, and Chinese market in terms of like how mobile games are being distributed in very unique and unusual ways now, and then how platforms here like Path and Facebook are trying to adopt some of the innovations that we're seeing there. And also this panel kind of comes at a time when some investors are arguing that kind of the barriers, the cultural barriers between different markets, could be ripe or could be more flexible for having like a true global hit where you could see, like with the cross promotion between Supercell and Gung Ho, you could see Japanese games doing well in Western markets, and then European or Western titles doing really well in Asian markets. So with that, if each of the panelists could go down the line, kind of say like who you are and where you're from, and then I think one interesting thing that's good to note here is that half of the panelists, we have representatives from SponsorPay and CrowdStar who are trying to like break into Asian markets, and then we also have NHN and DNA, which have been very active in trying to come to the West. So if you could not only say who you are, but also one lesson or even mistake or something that you've learned from in trying to go either East or West, that would be great. Do you want to go?
Okay. Hello, everybody. My name is Jun AKAGAWA from DNA. Actually, I arrived here 3 hours before, so not jet lag yet, but I'm a little bit tired. So yeah, and now I'm in charge of global platform strategy in DNA. DNA has 4 platforms in the world: Japan, Korea, China, and West. So I think it's really a pleasure for me to join this discussion. And actually, I think there are many big barriers between Asia and West. But I think, we can do big business in whole world. So today I'd like to introduce many things about whole industry and each differentiation in each market. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is James YOO. I'm working here in the San Francisco office for NHN USA. As Kim-Mai introduced, we are trying to bring the games that we developed in Asia, in Korea, especially in Korea, over here to the West. And as introduced already, I do think the world is divided into two when it comes to gaming. The culture is extremely different between the East and the West. And we are figuring how to break those barriers and how to make the process more smoother for the Western users to get kind of used to the graphics and the UI, monetization, that kind of stuff, over to the Western market. I am learning a lot at this moment. To be honest, I haven't had any failures because we didn't launch any games yet. But we actually did bring our PC online business to the States in 2006. And to be honest with you, it really didn't work out well. So we pulled that business back, and now we just going to have a new start here in San Francisco. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Randy Lee. I head up global business development for CrowdStar. We've been looking at and entering the Asian markets probably for the last 1.5 to 2 years. And I guess I see more than the East and West. I actually see the West, and then there's Japan, Korea, and China. From a Western developer standpoint, that how different the various markets are. So happy to be on the panel today.
Great. So I'm probably the odd man out because I don't own a gigantic Eastern or Western platform, but I run global developer relations for SponsorPay, and so we are a monetization platform for content owners in the web mobile space. And basically, what we get is through our platform a broad view on all the developers that are in the space, both from a user acquisition standpoint and an alternative monetization standpoint. And so what we've been able to do is work really closely with the Asian developers as they come over to the West and see how their different how they have different perspectives and approaches on how they monetize through different means. We also are pushing actively to get into the East. And to Randy's point, the way we look at it, we don't look at Asia as Asia, we look at it as Korea, Japan, China, and there's different needs for every locale, and how you approach that's really, really important. And I guess a little bit more relevant is before I took the job at SponsorPay is I ran third-party distribution and development for both DNA and GRI at separate times. So a little bit of perspective there.
So I wanted to ask, when I look at the top grossing charts for Korea and Japan and then even China, you see like mostly local titles really dominating the grossing charts. So what kind of real opportunity is there for a Western developer to actually be successful in any of these markets? Maybe you can take that first, because Line is so powerful in distributing titles now.
So what I see in the top grossing charts in Korea and Japan, to be honest, I don't really know that much about the Japanese market. I just know that Line is doing well in Japan. But it's like the Korean charts are dominated by Kakao, and the Japanese charts are dominated by Line. What you see in the two common things in both platforms, what you can see is the gaming sessions are very short. Usually the games can last for like a minute or two. I think the max is about 2 minutes that a gaming session is. I think that's because of most Koreans and Japanese people spend a lot of time in public transportation compared to here where everybody drives. Like when I used to live in Korea, I was always on the subway, always on the bus, and it was an hour or maybe 30 minutes to an hour to go to work, come back from work. And that's just, like if you go on the subway in Korea, everybody's just looking on their smartphones and playing games. So I think the playtime has to be short compared to the West, definitely. And for the games, I think because the games that are in Korea and Japan, like they tend to change really fast. It's very trendy, so you won't see games that were on the top grossing chart 1 year ago that's no longer existing on the top grossing anymore. So
It's very different from the U.S. market, because the U.S. market, I mean,
yes,
they
yes.
haven't changed as much.
So we think the maximum is about 3 months for one game that will be remaining on the top charts. And so for a tip for the Western developers is you have to really make a game that is a boom in the first 3 months, and because after that the game is pretty much going to disappear on the charts.
And so what does that mean for your production cycle? I mean, you have to release a game every 3 months?
That's basically what we do. We release I'll say like one game a month, but among like not every game is going to be successful in going up on top charts. So among like maybe 3 games every 3 months, maybe one will go up to the top charts. That's how I see it.
I'm from Tokyo, so I should talk about Japanese market, especially. The uniqueness of Japanese market is, as you may know, there are many card battle type of games. Actually, in top 2015 or so, it's based on card battle type. If it's only, not just card game, but also game system itself is based on card battle. Card battle genre is, born in mobile browser social game, which is done by DNA and GRI from 2009, and it still show, the great monetization system in all over the world. So in Japan, it's still dominant, and in China too. And actually, nowadays, changing the market is, Clash of Clans and Candy Crush Saga is actually doing really well in Japan too. And the uniqueness is both titles are only translation. I think there's no kind of localization. So if you created a great game, I think even in Japan, you can make success. That's true. And secondly, probably, I was afraid of Jenga. So Jenga do many localization in Japan actually on some game, but it's fair. So first thing I think you need to know is good game is first. Secondly, the kind of system of game type like card battle is really fit for Japanese market, I think.
So, I mean, there have been a ton of changes in the Japanese market in the last year. There's the rise of Line as a major like games distribution platform. There's also the ridiculous success of Gung Ho, which randomly for a while was worth more than Nintendo. So you have like first-party developers that are able to be profoundly successful without the need of like older, platforms like Korean DNA, and you have like the rise of this like other platform. Like, how do you respond to that strategically?
I see. One thing I have to say is, Japanese social gaming market has 6 billion US dollar in a year, and in mobile, the browser game market is still much bigger than native application market. Actually, now Puzzle and Dragons is earning over 100 million US dollar per month,
It's like
but
130 now or something. I saw.
I think so. and now both DNA and Korea still has like over 300 million or around 400 million US dollar per month. So browser gaming is still big. But in native application market, as you said, Puzzle and Dragon changed everything. But probably half of the revenue is coming from only that title, I think. And strategically, of course, we DNA we also do native application market titles. Actually, last year we truly prioritized browser gaming just to earn revenue. So from this year, we will launch many titles. From this summer, we will launch 1 or 2 titles in a month for native application market too. So first things DNA and Korea has to do is to make success in App Store or Google Play too, I think.
This is a question for Andy. So, when you think about CrowdStar and you think about how do you approach each of these 3 markets differently? Because they are really, really different from each other.
Yeah, and I think one of the things you talked about was how quickly it's changed.
Yeah.
So a year and a half ago when we were looking at the markets, it was all about, and if you looked at the charts back then, it was all dominated by Korean DNA titles. So at the mindset at that point was we have to have the platforms to be successful there. And then now, also with the emergence of Line, it's just our industry moves so quickly that if now to enter in those countries, again, if you look at where the top grossing is and where the distribution is, and that's one of the key things we look at when we go to new markets is who's got the distribution, then it would be these messaging apps. The problem is if you look at where CrowdStar is, we're not a company that can spit out 50 games, 100 games a year, whereas some of the game developers in Korea, that's what they're doing. They publish 50 games and they launch their own 30. So they got 70 titles coming out in 1 year. We don't work like that. Our studio, we're not a big company, so our studio really focuses on getting good titles out one at a time. So maybe we can get 3 or 4 or 5 at the most out a year, but we're not going to spit out 50. So the strategy is definitely very different in terms of how we have to approach the market. Our games don't work very well on messaging apps either. It's that short play, 2 minutes, 1 button press type games that have been doing very well. Ours are more deep, more engaging type games. So, looking at the markets from the West into each of those things, it's just you have to look at both the titles you have, how your company works, how your company develops games, and then figure out the right partner and the channels to go after. So it's not just about looking at the great numbers and go, okay, I bring my game there, it's going to get me big numbers. It's actually you have to look within and also look outside as well. So it's a big combination of both.
How large is your user base there? Like, what percentage of your business is that in terms of active usage?
Very small.
Okay, so
And
you're just starting.
it was a strategic move when we went there.
Yeah.
Start building the relationships, kind of get the flag in there, and then learning about the cultures and the different players. I think it's definitely helped us because as the market's changed, because of the relationships we've built, it's just easier now once we have the right title to get in the mix to get it launched fast.
This is a question for Ben and James. I'm kind of wondering, when you look at these messaging apps and their power in distributing games, like, do you have any predictions about what's going to happen in the next 3 to 6 months? I mean, is what we're seeing on the charts, is that kind of like, the first games that came to Facebook, like the first partners that they had this huge first mover advantage, and then as the platforms got kind of saturated, the benefit of them to third-party developers diminished over time. Is that something that you think we'll see with Line, Kakao, WeChat, et cetera?
I would say, like, with any new innovation, the market gets crowded very quickly once you see success.
Yeah.
And so the platform itself has to clean itself up. So Facebook didn't clean itself up at the beginning. So if you were opportunistic, you had to work viral channels.
Yeah.
You had to do CPI on a smart basis, you could get a really defensible lead if you had a great game and a great user base, and keep basically grinding and putting in implementations as a live service to keep people coming back. So I think you're already seeing it with Kakao. I think they announced today that they've got new requirements in terms of who they let publish. So the last I heard at GDC was that they were starting to clamp down on the viral channels. So the barriers to entry success is now much harder to get in. And so a platform will mature because the users will define that. And it will just be too hard to, like, the $30 million game per month, $30 million a month per game becomes the exception rather than the norm. So what you have to do, I would say, not just from this platform standpoint, but from Randy's what he had said is you have to make an investment, right? This is not a short-term play whenever you get into these markets. I think one of the stats that I used to kind of think about was Procter & Gamble, right? They said, hey, China is now our second biggest gross income market, and it only took 19 years, right? So you have to get in there, commit, understand the local intricacies, the local culture, the local tastes, and then be ready to capture the opportunities that emerge because it's so fluid and the tech's so advanced. But you can't expect to go in there day one and say, hey, I'm going to have one partner and it's just going to work. And I think, the rules of engagement are different. Just because you're CrowdStar or Zynga, you still have to get in line to get published on NHN. You don't just go over and get published. So I think you have to take that view. But more to your point, the platforms ultimately, by a user base and technology base, mature. And so that leaves room for innovation and new ones to emerge.
I mean, that's one thing that, I mean, Facebook, when they announced their kind of mobile publishing program this week, that's one thing, I mean, some people who have worked on that have kind of implicitly criticized, saying that the Kakao model, like, is a little bit too spammy in terms of how their distribution works. And so they wanted to be a lot more selective and careful, like, with their partners and how they promote and how they target those promotions compared to, like 5-6 years ago when they initially launched the Facebook platform. I'm wondering if you, do you have any kind of oversimplified or just kind of consolidated advice? Like, if you were talking to a developer and they said, we want to be in South Korea, Japan, China, like what are 3 different pieces of advice you would say to them?
I would say hire really, really well in each division.
But I mean,
right?
differentiated advice by market, like.
Well, I mean, I think these guys probably can speak a little bit more about the markets, but I think you've got to be very selective and really understand what the consumer does, what the actual, like, connectivity levels are and bandwidth levels in terms of the footprint and size of your game and how people are consuming that game. And then I would also say that from an ad side, I mean, you've got to understand the local market in terms of who the established players are and what actually works. Like, what does the consumer want? And what sort of devices are they using? Because to your point, mobile browser games are still very big and drive a lot. So not everyone's made the installed base shift to the native application. So you just have to be very, very aware of that too.
Let me talk about difference among 3 areas. In Korea, one reason why KakaoTalk is dominant market is, there are a really small CPI market actually. There are no inventory of advertisement in Korea. That's why many developers have to rely on KakaoTalk. Compared to that, Japan has many advertisement channels. So compared to Korea, line title is the number of line titles are smaller than Korea. So that shows, the good marketing model can make the game success in Japan, I think. And even in Korea, nowadays, some good MMO type of titles is launched without Kakao, and it shows a good performance. So I think, when we look at China market, actually there are no Google Play, and four big players is there: Tencent, 91, UC, and no, 360. So actually, in China, many players are relying on these for publishers, and what they are doing is, just sending many users. So in China, there are also no good advertisement model as of now. So players should use this kind of channel. But integration for each big market is really difficult for publishers. So publishers are using a kind of platform on platform like DNA or kind of iDream Sky or like that. That's a unique model in China, I think.
And when you consider all of these platforms on top of platforms or publisher partners, like what are you seeing in terms of rev shares? Because you publish in the West, it's like the standard 30%, and then you might have like your user acquisition marketing budget. But as you've said, in China, you might give half up to like an iDream Sky kind of publisher on top of all the the carrier billing plus whatever the App Store charges on top of that. So like when you look at Korea, Japan, and China, like what are the different rev shares a developer could expect to give up to these like platforms or publisher partners?
Yeah, revenue share should be determined based on power balance. So in China on PC, Tencent gets 90% or so revenue share actually, but now it's like 30% or so. So if one player will be dominant in Chinese market, the revenue share will be getting bigger and bigger for platformer. Yeah. But like today, if there are many players, I think power balance will be kept. In that case, players or platform will work, I think.
Did you want to?
Yeah. Here you go.
I would also say on the rev share market, there's a lot of different factors that you probably want to weigh into that besides the actual rev share on your IAP. I mean, I think to Junichi's point, the way you market and acquire users is very different, right? So if you look at Japan and Korea, the CPI costs and the people that you can use for your CPIs, the rates are much higher than you see in the U.S., right? In terms of cost per install and what people.
Could you give like a
So let's say I think Fixu had a report that you're looking at $1.23 a download or something here in the U.S. You're probably seeing 10 to 15 in Japan, 10 to 15 in Korea, because ultimately those users monetize so well that you can spend that much without thinking too much about it because your actual LTVs of your users are 5x than what you would see in the US. So you've got much more freedom. So when you think about the rev shares, you've got to factor in that market expertise, because if you go into a platform that already has those users and you just defray your costs by not having to go out and acquire those users, that's where kind of you've got to put a different line of thinking into the unit economics than just saying, hey, here's the rev share off of IAP.
So I think part of that is if your game structure can actually support a $10 LTV on the game. So we do a lot of female games. It may not support that. So even though there's advertising channels available, it may not be cost worthy to actually use them. So that hence when we look at the markets, it is about the distribution and then the type of users you have. Just because the ecosystem is there for you to acquire users, you may not be spending it, or your game cannot let you to spend that to be profitable.
I would not. So, one of the entry points that SponsorPay has in the market is that we have a lot of Japanese developers looking for Japanese inventory from non-Japanese publishers, because that inventory is already locked up through a MOAD or Grease reward network. So we see a lot of demand on the user acquisition side, to basically saying, hey, you've got a lot of Western developers that actually have just organically South Korea and Japan traffic. How can we acquire users in those areas through these guys? Because the cost is low and we know how to do it.
The paid user rate in South Korea, if the game is doing okay, I'll just say okay, is usually 3 to 5%, which is so much higher than here in the Western world. What Ben said about the cost per install cost is so much higher. It is true that the more you invest in marketing, the more return you will get back in Korea. That's how I see it at this moment. And also the difference between just about the messenger platforms with Kakao and Line is, well, I don't work for Kakao, and I know there's a session right after us by a person from Kakao, so he'll tell you more. But it's the people that you play the games with. Kakao uses this social graph where you can actually compete with your friends, you can co-work with your friends, and it's real friends. It's the friends that you have their telephone numbers. It's on your cell phone. It's in your memory card. So it's your real friends. It's not like your fake friends on Facebook. And I know, like, I have like 500 fake friends on Facebook too, but it's your real friends that you actually have their telephone numbers. So I guess the social graph, the competition among your friends with the scores, with the time, that's what really keeps the users, into playing the game and spending that money.
So DNA has been one of the very active Asian acquirers in the market over the last couple years, but you've kind of taken a pause since Njimoku and some other studio deals. Do you foresee being on a pause for a while in terms of expanding to Western markets?
Sorry.
Yeah.
Say it again.
No, I mean, DNA was a pretty active acquirer a couple years ago, and then you kind of slowed down since. And do you expect to continue to keep being on a pause for the time foreseeable?
Actually, our performance is, we are watching lifetime value, and we are balancing lifetime value versus, kind of CPI, or we are saying it ECP and U. And as long as, lifetime value is bigger than ECP and U, we can be profitable. That's simple, and that's the model we have. And actually, just because of good analytics, our CPI or our ECPNU is getting down and down day by day. So now our profitability is getting bigger. So in case of we have many acquisition of advertisement even in US, that's pretty good, and that's getting better. So we will keep buying advertisement, and also we will have many organic users just now. So cross promotion from one game to other game is also working well. So we do both. I mean, advertisement and cross promotion, hybrid model. We are thinking.
No, I was just asking, both GRI and DNA over the last couple of years made a huge push to expand into Western markets, and then now Nexon's doing it in a slightly different way, not through acquisitions, but through strategic investments. And so I was wondering, after a couple of years of watching these two companies, it feels like you guys have become less of a platform on platform here, and more of a kind of a first party developer for the US. And so I was wondering if that's also, that's going to be your strategy here going forward, is just to be kind of like a first party developer, and not to make any more big kind of strategic acquisitions here.
I see. Yeah, both are possible, I think. Actually, studio integration is difficult for us too, but now it's going well, but it takes time. So like GRI,
Pursuit of Happiness with Will Smith. This is the night for he and his son.
Okay. So like GRI, Fangio is doing Fangio model, and the Kingdom Age or Modern War was published before GRI's acquisition. So it's one of strategic way, I think. And also from platform perspective, kind of user base, that's one option to acquire it. So we are always considering about it too, even in US market, China market, Korea market too.
So for those of you who are watching the Chinese market pretty closely, what do you make of the 91 Baidu deal, and what that means for the alternative Android app stores there and game distribution?
Actually, we DNA have a joint venture with 91, so we are close. That's really big deal. I think it's biggest investment deal in China mobile internet industry. Not only mobile but also internet industry. So market is really hot. Nowadays, the top grossing title in China looks like it earns over 5 million per month. So
is that gross or net?
Gross at least. And the number of top grossing title like this is, the number is increasing. So acquisition of Baidu is important for them, because Baidu, as of now, Baidu's presence in mobile market is low. So for Baidu, it's okay. For 91 too, I think it's okay. But for NetDragon, which is,
It's an amazing deal.
yeah.
It's really.
For NetDragon, or mother company of 91, I still do not know why they, make 91 left.
I think from our standpoint, it's a good thing, because the hardest thing in China is in Android is the pirated app stores and attribution, right? So that's what's holding marketing back quite a bit in China, because you can sell CPI, but you have no idea what it links to, what store
Yeah.
the download comes from, if it was even the right game, if the callback was right, who to charge, who gets attribution. And so as you formalize the Android App Store process,
Yeah.
it helps. I mean, there is no silver bullet. There's
Yeah.
always going to be about 50 of them that you can't account for. But as long as one of the lead players leans into it and makes it an initiative, that helps, I think, grow the market itself, right? I think that's the key thing. You don't have that problem on iOS because it's a closed platform, right? So
Yeah.
it's a closed garden, so it's everything still goes through the App Store, so the attribution problem isn't there. But when you look at the population of China and the Android reach that is available there, having a little bit more, I think having a watchdog or lifeguard on duty in terms of like how you're doing the App Stores can only help the actual market push forward.
Do you guys have any predictions about how WeChat and its tests with game distribution will evolve there, and how it might be different or similar to what we've seen with Kakao Online in Japan and Korea?
I actually don't see it being that different in terms
Yeah.
of their strategy. Obviously big distribution channel, but in terms of, I think, the strategy of doing it, they're basically a little bit behind the Lions and Kakao's, at least working with them and talking to them about bringing our games on there. I haven't seen anything that's like that much vastly different.
Do you see the same thing happening there? Okay, cool. Let's see. I was wondering if I could ask you if you could. How do you think the genres and types of games that are popular on the top grossing charts in Japan have changed over the last year? Because you were talking about card battle games a lot, which were popular a year or two ago.
Yes. Even compared to last year, card battle is still doing good. Actually, the change in Japan is many casual games in top chart just because of line. And nowadays, kind of RPG type or kind of SLG type is also doing well. But the base system of these type of game is actually card battle test. I mean, gacha and fusion.
Yeah.
So gacha and fusion model is, can be localized to each game genre. So a kind of gacha and fusion model will be kept in Japan too. But based on that, many type of game will be increased, I think. For example, Windrunner, which is the biggest title in line, is a really casual action game like Super Mario. But the monetization model of Windrunner is same as card battle, I mean gacha and fusion. So such kind of gaming genre will be increased, I think.
Do you think this resurgence of casual titles there because of line is just temporary, and then we'll see like a more of a return to mid-core, more hardcore games there?
As he said, line social graph or Kakao social graph is real, and kind of mid-core type of game. Sometimes a real social graph is not suitable for that. I think there are big room for DNA and GRI too. For that point, we DNA and GRI have many virtual type of social graph. So in case of that, middle core will be increased, and not only line game but also other published type of game will be growth, I think.
What about in the Korean market and the Chinese market? Like, what do you see in the makeup of the popular genres there, and how it's changed over the last year?
So in Korea, I think TCG is also getting big. I think in the top 10 right now, I think almost 4 or 5, so half are TCG. So it's new, but it's growing fast. And the users, I think for like TCG genres, I think it's like the best genre that you can put on a mobile device. I think it's just made for mobile devices. And so users are, at first there is an entry to barrier because users are not used to the TCG genres at first, but once they get used to it, I mean, we see like a very, very high paid user rate. Also, Windrunner, running games are also very big too. So we are seeing a lot of running games that are appearing up in the top charts. Puzzle is also very big. The reason for puzzle is, as I explained, there a lot of time in public transportation, but it's very easy that you can play with one hand. I think that's very critical for success in Korea. I shouldn't generalize this, but people, like when we do free game testings based on the Korean audiences, before we launch a game, we do free game testing to see how the users think about the game. And I did it once here in San Francisco too, and the first thing I noticed was the Western people grab their cell phones with 2 hands, and all the Korean users grab their cell phone with 1 hand and started playing. And if they can't do it with 1 hand, they'll eventually grab their.
You don't have any explanation for why.
I don't know why. It's just they're just so used to playing games with 1 hand.
In Japan too.
In Japan too, right? And so that's why it has to be simple, and like if you go and see actually the top 10 grossing games in Korea right now, all the games are played by 1 hand. That's a tip for.
So
for
if you're going
Korean
to
market.
localize, or you're going to bring a Western title there, you have to change it from a 2-hand to a 1-hand game, basically. That's what you're
Well, you don't
advising.
have to, but I mean, I think it'll be so much better if it can be played with 1 hand. Right.
Are there any other differences that you notice like that in your tests?
I've noticed that. There is one thing I did notice was the Korean users. They're okay with more complicated UI compared to the Western users. The buttons can be small on the screen. If you go to Asia, you can put a lot of stuff on it, and they'll still be able to read and what to push, and they know what to do next. Compared to the Western users, it has to be the buttons have to be a little bit bigger. The UI has to be more simple, and including the graphics too. In terms of graphics, the design. I mean, Koreans are. It's the same with Japanese too, where. If you look at a character graphic, for example, it has to be bright. The colors have to be bright, a lot of colors, very pretty, very cute. Whereas compared to the US, it has to be thick lines. If it's a guy character, it has to be a macho. If it's a female character, it has to be very sexy. But I think that's the cultural difference that the West and the East have. Yes.
I would actually agree with that as well. If you just look at how advertising gets overloaded in Asia, whether it's walking through the streets of Shibuya, or just on your web browser in China when Qihu blows up all these things in your web browser, they're just used to seeing a ton of things and being able to zero in on what they want to see and what they want to do, and hence the game can be much more complex and have a lot more things than they can figure it out. In the West, I think we just don't really like that. We don't like that feeling of ads everywhere and having to decipher this and that, and that again with the game design differences of what we do in the West and kind of how they design things in the East, it is different. So,
I mean, I would add if you look at the East versus the West. I mean, the East, when you launch a game, there's not tutorials because the assumption is how to play the game, or you will figure it out and you'll jump right in. Whereas in the West, a lot of time is spent on optimizing the tutorial to get people into the funnel. Whereas that's not a barrier in Korea or Japan. People are just ready to engage right off the bat. So it's just a difference in game design and how you prioritize what you're pushing out, especially at launch. And I think to James's point, that becomes even more crucial in Korea because if you've got a 3-month lifetime span of your game, you've got to get people in immediately, and your retention rates around 24 hours, 7 days, pretty much make or break or define your game at that point.
Let me add Chinese situation. One thing, actually, even in China, card battle is really dominating. Probably over half of top 20 grossing is card battle. But the originality in China market is there are too many parameters actually compared to Japanese card battle. It's not only card battle, but also RPG or SLG or MMO. It's same. And many parameters, Chinese people can make these parameters more stronger and stronger for heavy users. And actually, in China, 5% user will have 95% of revenue or like that. So that's a unique point in China, I think.
Randy, this is a question for you as a developer. So when you look at all of these markets, I mean, for like a mid-sized or smaller developer or whatever, who are the must-have partners? Like, if you go to South Korea, is it a must-have to distribute through Kakao right now? If you go to China, who are the app stores that are a must-have, or is WeChat a must-have yet?
Yeah. So I think we look at 2 things. One is just a distribution avenue for the game. once you go out there, you're going to have to count on your partner to be doing the distribution for you. So you're not going to have the budget to be able to do that. You're going to need a local partner. So, must-haves change actually with the market changing. So a year ago, it would be must-have would probably be a GRI or a DNA. Now the must-have is probably a line to do it.
How do you feel about that?
I feel good.
And again, if I look at pure distribution of who can get me to the audience based on my type of game and the demo I'm looking for, it's a more female-based demo online.
Yeah.
Maybe they play a little bit more games, a little more casual. That works well for us. So it is a little bit different. In China, we went with Tencent games and big reach everywhere. But
What was the? Can I ask what was the rev share? Were they 90% or was
no,
it?
it wasn't 10 cent to us.
Yeah.
So it was a little bit better, but we had to. I mean, there was different responsibilities. So there's no set rev share. I think you have to there's always you have to go by. Well, if you guys do this, we're responsible for that. You'll do the ops, you'll do the customer service, but we'll do the dev work, and then you kind of figure it out. And plus, kind of marketing type of commitment that people are willing to do.
Who are the must-haves in China right now? If you were looking at a publisher partner or an app store partner or distribution.
Yeah, I think obviously NetDragon's done very well for them on the Android side. I haven't we're not very strong on Android, so for us it has been a lot of iOS. If I was to look at a bet, I would say that WeChat is going to be very successful with just the
Whatever
sheer
they do,
volume, whatever
yeah.
they do, they can just push it out. So that could be a good one to go after. And then, is my game the right one for that?
Yeah. What about all the different kind of publisher localizing partners there, like an iDream Sky or Yodo One or who?
Yeah. So we talked to a ton of them. I did just a whole like a roadshow meeting tons of different publishers, and that one I think it just comes down to kind of a gut feel on because they all say how they have relationships with everyone. They all have channels. And they've all had successes somewhere or another. So at the end of the day, it's just kind of analyzing, who that partner is, how can you trust them, how that working relationship will be, tech-wise, can they actually take whatever they're going to do and do it, push it out without putting too much burden on us. So there's no silver bullet there either. It's just there's quite a few different partners to choose from. And those are basically the iDream Sky publishers. Then the platform guys will do it as well, right? So, then there's that option. So if I work with a platform partner, maybe they're putting more skin in the game. So maybe they'll push the game a little bit more aggressive than somebody who's just a pure publisher that does 100 games a year. And you have to kind of weigh all those decisions, and then kind of make a bet on that.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think you can go it alone. I mean, that's kind of the clear message. But I think, not to sound archaic, but you also, everything's cyclical in the market. So you can't forget about the OEMs and the telcos, right? So a year ago, if you would have had this conversation in South Korea, you're talking SK Telecom, not Kakao. But in a matter of 12 months, SK Telecom's app store is now no longer the dominant force. So you've got to go in, again, this comes down to long-term vision, long-term investment. You've got to go in, understand the ecosystem, and actually make partnerships based upon individual products with different partners. I don't think you're going to go do a library portfolio partnership with one or the other. I mean, with DNA and GRI, you share publishers. I mean, you share publishers and joint ventures, right? You've got different people doing different partnerships with both because one set of titles is going to work better on one platform than the other. So I don't think you want to go all in with only one. You've got to give yourself a little bit of flexibility, and you've got to look at the overall ecosystem to make sure you're making the right decisions based upon the audience that you want in the game that you're putting out in each of those regions.
So we had talked to like DNA. It was they had the DNA West. They had a presence in China. They did the deal with NetDragon, so they had a presence there as well. They have their Japan presence. So it could have been very easy. One deal maybe can get all the countries. At the end of the day, we just didn't feel like that was probably the right move.
Because
I think that's the easy move, but I don't know if it's the right move because it's just each of them have their strengths. So they were coming into the market fairly new to China, but then there were some entrenched people that are already there.
there's a lot of entrenched people there.
Yes, yeah. So that's why it was like each country was actually with the different.
So you
partner,
wanted to have a
different deal.
custom strategy for each one.
Yeah, and I think, I guess I don't know if that's the right play or not, but there's a full turnkey. There are full turnkey options out there. Is it the right one for you? For us, we felt it wasn't. I still think it's probably the right choice because ultimately you end up meeting just a ton of different players, and you work with a lot of different players. You see how they work, and the Asia strategy is not one that just happens in a year. You're in there for a long time, that you have to have relationships with just a lot of different players.
How does the Android iOS breakdown of each market affect like what you recommend to different developers? Like you got Korea is overwhelmingly Android, China is becoming increasingly overwhelming Android. How does that affect your advice to how to break into these markets? You can take it, yeah.
So, for instance, the Android market in Korea is 3 times bigger than the iOS market. In terms of revenue, Korea and Japan's Google Play revenue, like is bigger than the rest of the world's Google Play revenue. That was on the news too. I guess that's basically because of Samsung and LG's dominance in Korea. They're both Korean, manufacturers. For tips for developers in the West, I know still iOS is still big, but there has to be an Android build. I've met with a lot of developers in the West, and there are some developers that only have the iOS build, but there has to be an Android build too in order to be successful in Korea. Japan, I think, is a little bit more iOS friendly than Korea is, but I think in general, it is a must to have an Android build.
In Japan, Google Play's revenue, is, as you may know, number 1 in all over the world. But actually, market share between Android and iOS is like 50-50. So in Japan, iOS market is bigger than Google Play just now. So I think it shows Japanese mobile gaming market is so huge. So I think you should do both. And in Korea and China, I think Android is bigger.
We're running out of time here, so I'm just wondering if anyone in the audience has any questions that they want to ask. Just feel free to pop right up. No one. No. Oh, we have a question.
Hold on just a second.
Thank you. I represent InMobi, and so obviously my question is going to be on the monetization of games and if there are any specific differences between the percentage of revenue you see from in-app purchases versus ad formats between the 3 markets.
Does anyone want to take that?
I can't really speak on and you're probably not looking for an answer from me. I'm pretty clear on that. So I'll put on my GREE and DNA hat at that point. I think when you look at the games, the specific genres that these games are focused on, especially on the mid-core and into the percentage of people that monetize, I think in-app purchasing is still going to be the dominant focus for any developer in this space. But you can see the ad revenue becoming more of a part of that, but I think in Japan especially, that's a factor of the fact that GREE and DNA own the number 1 and number 2 reward-based ad exchanges in the space, so they kind of gobble up both. So, but I think from a percentage point system, I would say ads will never or have not yet gotten to, I would say, even above 5 to 6% of total revenue per any game. Is that about right? Yeah. So I still think 95% of your revenue in that area comes from IAP.
And generally, it's just way more overwhelming with
Yeah.
IAP than advertising compared to Western markets in general, right?
Yeah, and advertising in Japan is TV commercials and 30-second spots and blogs, and I think DNA and GREE both really started as celebrity blogs as a portion of, and that's how they got a lot of their installed base and then evolved into platforms. And I think that's something that people forget about the history of the companies of how they started.
Yeah, in Japan, TV commercial for mobile gaming is actually very popular, and DNA and GREE is spending many money for that just because it's very good. So yes, in Japan, like such kind of marketing, having a partnership like us or some partners is really good, I think. For Korea and China, actually customer support is so important. So just to have that, I think Western companies should have partnership to local model. And
Do we have any other questions?
Yeah. I had one over here.
Oh,
The mic. I was just wondering if there are any particular game genres that don't perform, specifically casino style gameplay, if that's something that's has cultural stigma attached to it in the East, or if that's something that's still acceptable as a certain gameplay genre. Does that make sense?
Yeah, casino.
Casino games are also doing very well. It's just, in terms of Korea, they're more used to playing like card games, like especially like poker. And Korea has this traditional like poker type game called Go Stop. But users are more used to play them on the web browser rather than the mobile phone at this moment. But we are seeing more casino type games, especially like slots and what should I say, like bingos type of games appearing up on the top charts at this moment. And that is actually one thing that NHN is really strong with. We are most of the revenue comes from the poker and the Go Stop from the web board, and so we are actually trying to build into the mobile space as well for that too. Is that?
We had a question here.
Hi, my name is Heita Miyoshi. I work for a company called IGA Works that is based in Seoul, Korea, running a marketing and monetization platform. So, you know, looking at the situation, I'm based in Seoul, Korea, and originally from Japan, so I look at both markets in a way. And looking at Korean market, KakaoTalk kind of took the market, and the same thing is happening in Japan by Line. What do you guys think that the same thing will happen in China by like messaging platform coming as a gaming platform and take the market?
At least share of Tencent will be increased, I think. Now, actually, I think 360 is bigger than Tencent for download, I think. But within 1 year, Tencent will be number one, I think. But the market is still fragmented in China, so I think it will be kept because Baidu will put a huge power with new 9.1. So yeah, Tencent will be really strong, but it's not only the solution in China, I think. Yeah.
I think that's all the time we have right now. So I just really wanted to. Do we have?
Yeah, and with that, I just wanted to say thank you very much to the panel. Please join me in thanking Kim-Mai, CUTLER, and her distinguished panel, Misters Lee, AKAGAWA, YOO, and CHEN.